We are up to Chapter 8, The Panic in Paris. Neither Leo nor Abby slept for the rest of the flight. As soon as he'd closed the door to the bathroom, Leo had turned into an opossum, a transformation he could only attribute to the fact that the steward's horrified face had a vaguely marsupial-like quality about it. Thankfully, the turn had been quick. He had patiently sat on the sink studying his furry light grey face and tiny black eyes in the mirror, and checking the bathroom for damage. Remarkably, despite the fact that she had been a full-grown moose, Abby had managed to avoid breaking anything in the small cubicle. Thinking about the commotion they had caused, Leo reflected that it was just as well they hadn't made it to the smaller toilets in the economy section. When he finally returned, Leo and Abby had been quickly ushered from the first-class section, with many loud apologies from the crew about their digestive discomfort. They'd even been given complimentary soft drinks from the first-class bar. Back in their seats after another awkward climb over the snoring man in their row, they erupted into fits of hysterics at having survived such a close call. "What just happened should never have happened," said Abby. "Our body clocks got seriously twisted. At least we know these stretchy suits work." "I can't believe you turned into a moose," whispered Leo over the hum of the 747 engines. "In first class. You were a first-class moose." "I wasn't expecting to turn, was I?" said Abby, sipping her creaming soda through a straw. "I shouldn't have watched that David Attenborough documentary after we took off. Anyway, you're the one to talk, opossum boy." "I was trying to keep it low-key," protested Leo. In fact, once he'd turned, the hardest part had been resisting the urge to drink from the toilet bowl. "What?" he said suddenly when he noticed Abby staring suspiciously at his head. "You've got grey hairs," said Abby, peering more closely. "No, I don't," said Leo defensively, as he pulled his head away. In fact, Leo had little doubt that his hair had probably retained some of the opossum colour. The sandiness that he'd had his whole life had been fading ever since his 31 simultaneous turns in the tunnels at Camp Stillbone, a feat he hoped never had to execute again. He suspected that something inside his biology had snapped by forcing so many turns at once, blurring the usually well-defined start and end of each turn. Ever since, his hair had started growing at a disarmingly rapid rate, and subtly changing colour with each turn. "Well, I'm telling you," said Abby, shrugging and slurping the last of her can. "There are definitely flecks of grey in there. Prematurely aging, I'd say. You're probably under too much stress." "Can't imagine why," said Leo, pulling on his beanie and hoping that the grey hairs might fade away by the time he took it off again. "Got any food?" said Abby. Extreme hunger was the after-effects of turning, especially after turning into something enormous. "Only everything Ernie gave me," replied Leo. Leo reached into his backpack and pulled out the cooler bag of Ernie's snacks. Ernie had given it to Leo with wishes of good luck when they farewelled each other at the airport. Back at Camp Stillbone, Leo had discovered that Ernie was always equipped with a huge supply of seriously tasty snacks. "That Ernie kid is the real deal," said Abby, munching on a handful of caramel popcorn. "Weird, too, in a good way. Wonder how he'll go in Rome." Leo chewed on a homemade muesli bar and looked out the window. The plane was cruising high over the ocean, and he could see an endless vista of blue, illuminated by the glow of dawn at one end of the horizon and the glitter of night at the other. It was like seeing the entire turn of the earth compressed into a single panorama. It was breathtaking, and yet it made his chest ache. "Do you think Mum is out there somewhere?" he asked Abby. She didn't answer at once. Leo and Abby's mum had disappeared when Leo was only little, and their dad had never really recovered. Vernon rarely spoke of it. Indeed, Leo and Abby had only recently learned the full story of their mum's sudden disappearance. She had been about to turn and had run from the beach across the road from their home while Vernon watched on. She had turned into a dolphin, her favourite animal. Vernon had seen that much. But she had disappeared into the waves and never come back. Vernon had desperately searched for her, but nobody had ever seen her again. Abby looked pensively out the window. "I know Dad still hopes she's alive," she said. "What about you?" asked Leo. Abby wouldn't look him in the eye. She picked aimlessly at her chipped black fingernails. "It's been so long, Leo, too long, more than 10 years. Don't you think that if she was going to come back, she would have come back by now? Leo stared out the window, not wanting to concede that Abby was right. Le Parc Zoologique de Paris, read Leo slowly as he and Abby stood outside the gates of the Paris Zoo. They'd arrived in mid-afternoon and, despite being jet-lagged, had decided to navigate the labyrinth of underground metro system and start their search for Gonzales immediately. Although it was a cool, cloudy day, the zoo was bustling with visitors. As Abby bought their tickets, Leo was startled to hear her talking in near-perfect French. "What?" asked Abby as she handed Leo his ticket a moment later. "Since when do you speak French?" "Since year 9. "But," said Leo, staring at Abby, "I didn't think they taught French at Crichton Bluff High." "They don't," said Abby over her shoulder as she headed through the gates. "I taught myself. It's amazing what you can find in library books." "Wow," said Leo, hurrying after her gobsmacked. "You're smarter than you look, sis. Ow!" Abby stuck her foot out, sending Leo crashing into the ground. "Sorry," said Abby, "you were saying?" "What are we even looking for here?" asked Leo, brushing himself off and looking at the map of the park. "Anything that seems out of place," said Abby. "Like a herd of elephants doesn't seem out of place in a major European city in the middle of winter," said Leo, pointing to an enormous enclosure to their left. "Anything that seems out of place at a zoo," said Abby. The zoo was on an enormous triangle of land divided into 5 biozones, each filled with animals from different regions of the world. Leo and Abby walked through the Africa section, where a massive man-made mountain towered above a fake plain, simulating the savannah. All around them they could hear squawks and calls of animals of different species, intermingling with the chatter of tourists, crying children, and a small passenger train that was doing sightseeing loops of the park. The whole scene was so normal that it seemed ridiculous to Leo that Clement Gonzales could be hiding here. And even if he was, how would he even put Plan 275 into action? They walked past an enclosure where an orangutan was swinging upside down from a rope, its orange fur swishing about its lanky body. Leo was reminded of Abby's recent turn in the vertical tunnel under Yakspike Island. "You did it better, sis," he said, pointing to the glum-faced orangutan. "If that's supposed to be a compliment," said Abby, "you need to work on your compliments." They walked around the park for 2 hours in jet-lagged fatigue, checking out every enclosure before they slumped into some plastic chairs at a wooden picnic table outside the zoo's cafeteria. While Abby went inside for food, Leo wondered if his dad had landed in Antarctica and if Ernie had arrived in Rome. It felt surreal for Leo to know that his closest Turner allies were spread all over the globe on a search for their common enemy. "Looks like your hair is back to normal," said Abby, arriving back at the table with 2 mountainous cones of gelato. "Kind of weirdly long, though." Leo was about to respond when a sudden commotion broke out behind Abby, making her flinch and drop both gelatos. "Oh, man," said Abby. Leo barely had time to see the gelatos hit the ground when he heard voices shouting urgently in French. A zookeeper bolted between the tables, yelling, "Échappe!" into his radio. "What's he saying?" said Leo, watching the man bolt away between the buildings. "Échappe," said Abby, peering after the zookeeper. "I think that's escape." Leo didn't hear Abby's last words. He was already standing up and stumbling backwards in shock. 2 full-sized giraffes were running straight for them. The frightened creatures were bolting haphazardly between the tables, knocking over chairs and umbrellas as tourists scrambled to get out of the way. Leo was about to sprint in the opposite direction, but Abby grabbed his arm and yanked him back. "Watch out!" she yelled, pushing him aside as 3 more giraffes thundered past them from the other direction. Mayhem erupted as the 5 agitated giraffes charged frantically through the picnic area. Leo dived under the wooden table, dragging Abby with him as a giraffe clomped past the exact spot he'd just been, its leg getting stuck in Leo's overturned chair and dragging it along noisily. Another giraffe snagged its horns on a power cable, snapping the wires and sending live sparks firing into the air. The power cable whipped to the ground and writhed across the asphalt, thrashing like a snake on fire. The noise sent the 5 giraffes into a frenzy. A group of zookeepers sprinted into the picnic area, shouting. One of them was loading darts into a rifle. "Tranquilizers," said Abby as she lay on the ground. "Keep your head down." A pane of glass smashed behind them as the giraffe put its hoof through the cafeteria's sliding door. People were running everywhere, dodging the great swinging legs of the giraffes. Other people cowered on the spot, stunned. A toddler was crying about his spilt milkshake, oblivious to the pandemonium around him. 3 shots rang out with a cracking, and Leo ducked as a series of red-feathered tranquilizer darts streaked through the air. The first just missed the neck of the giraffe and thwacked into a tree. The second lodged in the butt cheek of a teenager who'd been secretly glugging slushy mixture straight from the nozzle of the machine outside the cafe. He slumped sideways, his hands still clutched on the lever. The blue mixture continued pouring all over his face. The third shot hit the neck of a skinny tourist in a bright yellow tracksuit. His hand clamped onto the dart and pulled it out. He stared at it, eyes bulging, and let out a garbled squeal and fell headfirst into the garbage bin shaped like a hippo. Meanwhile, the 5 giraffes galloped away towards the park's exit, chased by a pack of zookeepers, their radios crackling with a stream of urgent French voices. "How the heck did 5 giraffes escape?" said Leo as he watched them disappear, leaving a mess of upturned tables, broken umbrellas, and terrified tourists in their wake. "The fence around their enclosure was huge." "They didn't escape," said Abby. Leo looked at her. She was holding a CB radio that had fallen from the belt of one of the zookeepers. She had it to her ear. "They're saying that all of the zoo's giraffes are still in their enclosure." She pointed to the pack of giraffes galloping out of the front gate. Those ones just appeared out of nowhere. Oh dear, that is the end of chapter 8. Our next chapter, chapter 9, is called Beasts, Bugs, and Bedlam. Bedlam means craziness.